Today, we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating stories in tech, the turbulent history of artificial intelligence. Specifically, we're looking at the decades between the 70s and the 2000s. It was a wild ride of massive hype, then crushing disappointment, and then a quiet revolution that almost nobody saw coming. I mean, it's a story of these incredible booms and devastating busts. We call them the AI springs and winters. Which brings up a really interesting question. How on earth did a field with so much promise manage to crash and burn not just once, but twice before it became the absolute force it is today? So to answer that, we're going to take a journey through the dramatic seasons of AI's history. We'll start with that first AI winter, then you'll see a brief thaw thanks to something called expert systems, and then we'll have to brace for the second freeze. After that, though, we get to the really good part, the quiet revolution that was powered by data. And finally, how AI sneakily worked its way into the new millennium. Let's get right into it. Okay, so our first stop is this period, where all that boundless, early optimism around AI just came to a sudden, screeching halt. This was the first great disappointment. Before the freeze really set in, the 1960s were an absolutely incredible time for AI research. People genuinely believed that human-level intelligence was just right around the corner. But by the mid-70s, reality started to bite back. Landmark critiques like the Lighthill Report in the UK basically convinced governments to pull the plug on funding. And what's so ironic is that right as this winter was beginning, some of the most foundational ideas were being born. Concepts like Minsky's frames and backpropagation, which is a way to teach networks by correcting their mistakes, were being developed, but their true power wouldn't be unlocked for decades. So take this idea of a frame. Just think of it like a mental blueprint. You have a frame in your head for a birthday party, right? It probably includes cake, presents, singing, that sort of thing. When you walk into a new party, you use that frame to make sense of what's happening. Minsky's brilliant idea was that AI could use these exact same kinds of frames to understand context. It was an idea that was just way, way ahead of its time. So this first AI winter wasn't just caused by one thing. It was a total perfect storm. Governments, like DARPA over in the US, they slashed funding. The real world turned out to be infinitely more complicated than the neat and tidy game boards AI had mastered. And let's be honest, the hype had gotten completely out of control, and the computers back then just weren't powerful enough to run the ambitious programs that researchers were dreaming up. But then, after years out in the cold, a brand new approach brought AI back from the brink. It was way more practical, more focused, and, well, most importantly, it was profitable. This comeback was powered by something called expert systems. So instead of trying to create this general, all-knowing intelligence, researchers decided to focus on capturing the knowledge of a human expert in one, very specific, narrow area, like, say, configuring a computer system or diagnosing a medical condition. It was basically AI with a day job. So why did businesses get so excited all of a sudden? Well, just look at the XCAN system at Digital Equipment Corporation. It automated this super complex process of figuring out computer orders for customers, and the result was just staggering. It saved the company $25 million a year. Yeah, a number like that, it gets people's attention and it opens up the floodgates for investment. But while expert systems were having their big moment in the spotlight, other really crucial work was happening much more quietly in the background. Canada, especially the University of Toronto, was becoming a new hub for AI research. And it was there that pioneers like Geoffrey Hinton were dusting off that old idea of teaching networks from their mistakes, backpropagation. And they were refining the very concepts that would eventually power a much, much bigger AI revolution down the road. And, you guessed it, the optimism didn't last. The very same expert systems that sparked this thaw began to show their own deep-seated problems. Pretty soon, another winter was on its way. The big problem was that these expert systems were incredibly expensive and just a nightmare to maintain. Every single rule had to be hand-coded by an expert, and if just one little thing in the real world changed, the whole system could just break. They were really brittle. On top of that, the specialized hardware market for these systems, they were called LISP machines, that whole market collapsed. And once again, government funding started to dry up. The AI bubble had burst again. But this second winter, this one was different. Because while the AI industry was freezing over on the surface, a quiet revolution was starting that would change absolutely everything. The explosion of the internet and the dawn of big data. This quote really just captures the whole essence of that era perfectly. As more and more people went online in the 90s, they were creating this unimaginable resource, just massive data sets of text, of images, and of user behavior. It was the fuel that the next generation of AI had been waiting for all along. And this led to maybe the most fundamental shift in AI's entire history. We moved away from trying to hand code rules for intelligence. Instead, we started building systems that could learn patterns directly from all that data. It was the difference between giving a robot a fish and teaching it how to fish. This data-driven approach was so much more robust, more scalable, and, well, it's the foundation of all modern AI today. Then, in 1997, the whole world got this stunning public demonstration of this new power. IBM's Deep Blue defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov. But here's the key thing to understand. Deep Blue wasn't thinking like a human. It was using brute force computation to analyze 200 million positions per second. It was a clear sign that sheer computational power had become its own form of intelligence, and it had reached a terrifying new milestone. So as we entered the 2000s, right after the dot-com crash, AI stopped making these splashy headlines. Instead, powered by all this new data, it started quietly weaving itself into the very fabric of our digital lives. And a lot of the time, we didn't even realize it was happening. Old ideas were being totally reimagined for this new data-rich world. For instance, a simple decision tree just follows one rigid path of questions, which makes it fragile. But in 2001, a guy named Leo Breiman introduced the random forest. Instead of one tree, it creates hundreds of them, and then just takes a majority vote. It's basically the statistical version of the wisdom of the crowd, and it proved to be way more accurate and robust. So where was this new AI? Well, it was hiding in plain sight. It was the machine learning in your spam filter deciding what was junk mail. It was Amazon recommending what book you should probably buy next. It was Google learning how to rank search results. And with the release of the Roomba in 2002, a little piece of AI was even cleaning our living room floors. AI was no longer some grand, futuristic promise. It was a practical utility. So we've followed AI through its optimistic springs, its brutal winters, and its quiet, revolutionary thaws. It has survived these multiple cycles of boom and bust, and each time, it's reemerged stronger and more capable. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. Is the incredible AI summer we're all experiencing right now finally here to stay? Or is another winter somewhere over the horizon?